Here comes one of the most exciting parts about QuickBooks. It's how to generate invoices. And I know that all of my entrepreneur friends out there love that because invoices means money. So let me show you the money. In order to generate an invoice, you're going to go to your Quick Create button, navigate over to Customers, and click Invoice. So this is what a general invoice screen looks like. If you get into customizing your invoices, you might have some additional fields in here. We will cover that a little bit later. But right now, we're just going to cover the very basics of generating an invoice. So the first thing you want to do is to choose your customer. So let's choose Amy's Bird Sanctuary. If you've been a good bookkeeping student and you've already populated the billing address in the customer's contact record over in the customer section of QuickBooks. If not, you can do that right here. One of the best practices I teach good Cents bookkeepers when they come in to work in our company in-house and people that I go outside of the office and train is to literally take the time to look at every field. I understand that we live in a super fast-paced society and all of us are constantly rushing around and flashing past screens every day and we can miss important information. But by taking the time, literally going field by field, this will help you find any errors and correct them before you send them to your client. And I personally really believe this is super important because your invoicing is a front-facing mechanism to your customer bases. So your invoice should be perfect because that invoice, if it's perfect, tells your customers and your clients that you care and that you're professional and that you perform impeccable services. If you send an invoice and you forgot the Y on Sanctuary and you didn't have this populated, and let's say you made the date December 16th and we're in November, now your due date's going to be wrong. If you have spelling mistakes in here, it's just poor form. So like I said, take the time to move through every field and make sure that everything is populated accurately. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to check, is this email address still valid? Sometimes staff changes on the processing side of accounts payable. So you want to make sure that you're sending this invoice to the right person. The billing address probably hasn't changed, but it's good to have a look. Your terms may change. Sometimes your terms for a client might be due upon receipt. For example, if you are a graphic designer or a web designer, you probably have a 50% deposit or something like that that's due immediately upon the signing of a contract. And at the close of the project, you might give your customer net 15 days or net 30 days. So make sure your terms are accurate. Make sure the invoice date is accurate. QuickBooks can be a little weird with that sometimes. It normally defaults to the date that you're generating the invoice, but you might have had to send this invoice a few days ago, or maybe you're generating something in advance. Make sure your invoice date is correct. Make sure the due date is correct. Now you're going to go down here and select your product or service. So let's just say design. Now recall from our module on setting up items and services, or products and services, the description is the default. It's whatever you set up in the item, but you can customize this any way you want. You don't have to use that description. I recommend putting in those descriptions when you're setting up your products and services because generally there's some sort of baseline information that will always remain the same, and then you can customize it. So let's say graphic design, spring, summer 2016 campaigns. Make sure your rate is correct. If you have selected the sales tax option in your preferences, you'll have this icon. If you do not collect sales tax and you have not turned on the sales tax option in QuickBooks Online, you will not have this icon. But let's hypothetically say it's taxable, just in case, right? And you can set up your tax rates. That's done in your sales tax section. If you wanted to say, give a 10% discount, you could do that. And then here shows the total and the balance due. Now, for me, and this goes back to data integrity, I always save the invoice first. I find it very helpful to go to the print preview screen and actually look at the invoice as it would appear to the client. Because you can see this view is very different than this view. And this print preview view is what your customers will actually see. And I find it much easier to pick out mistakes, typos, incorrect information in this view. So before you send this to your client, so you know that your invoice is beautiful and perfect, no typos, no incorrect dates, nothing, take a minute, go to the print preview, scan it, beautiful, looks good. You can close this, and then you can click Save and Send. Your invoice subject will be a default. You can change that. You can change your default emails as well. You can also override this, type a custom email. And then click Send and Close. Now, of course, we are using the sample company, so it's giving us an error message. But what I recommend you do when you're first setting this up, generate an invoice and send it to a dummy email address that you control so that you can see what the customers will receive on their end. And that's very helpful for you because that's the user experience, right? We're all fluent with this terminology now. We want the user experience for our customers and clients to be great. And in order for you to know how that user experience is, you need to go through it yourself as if you were your own customer. So first invoice that you generate in QuickBooks, it's a dummy invoice. You're going to send it to yourself at a dummy email address so that you can see what it looks like. So I know it might take you maybe a couple of days to do that process yourself, but I did actually want to create a dummy invoice and send it to myself and show you what that looks like so you have an idea. So I went into my own QuickBooks file and I generated this particular invoice. So this is actually a screenshot of the email that I received. And this is similar to what your customers would receive. They would receive an email that says invoice 3917 from Cents Bookkeeping. Inside of the actual email body would appear your logo, the company name, the invoice number, the due date, and the balance due. And this was the email message I sent. Dear QuickBooks Online Master, that was the customer name that I created. I think that's clever because you too will soon be a QuickBooks Online Master. Here's your invoice. We appreciate your prompt payment. Thank you for your business. Cents Bookkeeping. So this is an email that you can customize. Now I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit, but in the next section or the next screen, you're going to see what it's like when a client actually clicks this View Invoice button. So when your customers click that View Invoice button, this is the screen that they're brought to, which is hosted right on the Intuit server. So this is the actual invoice. They could print this off. It has your company information, your logo, who this was billed to, the invoice number, the date, the terms. This is why we talked about that data integrity issue. This is why we want to make sure all this information is correct prior to emailing the customer. This is the product or service we billed for. We billed for bookkeeping training. The quantity was one QuickBooks training at $1,000. And this is the balance due. Now, I have Intuit's merchant services connected and set up on my QuickBooks Online file. And if you do that, and we're going to talk about that shortly, your customers will have the option to click this Pay Now button right here. And I have it so that my customers can pay by all these different sorts of credit cards, and they can also pay me through an ACH bank draft. When your customers pay you by credit card, it's subject to a percentage fee, and that can range anywhere from 3% to 5%. It depends on how much volume you process each month, your credit rating, and how long you've been with Intuit and proved that you are a good customer for merchant services. In other words, you don't have a lot of fraud charges or chargebacks, things of that nature. If they pay you by bank draft, as of 2016, November 2016, the fee for that is very small. It's only 50 cents per transaction. So anyway, I have both of those options set up, and my customers can click the Pay Now button, and then they're prompted to put in their own bank details, et cetera, et cetera. We're not going to do that right now. And then click next, and it processes the invoice. Now, the beautiful thing about that is as soon as your customers complete this process, this payment process, the payment is automatically applied to the invoice. So you don't have to manually go in and receive the payment from your customers. That becomes automated on the back end of QuickBooks, and it's beautiful. So that's how you generate an invoice. Next up, we are going to talk about receiving payments, and we're going to talk about QuickBooks Online merchant services a little bit more in depth.